How's it going, everybody? My name is Antonio, and I'm back on the barbecue today with David O'Brien from Stuhini Exploration. Who's not here with us today, though, is your financial advisor. What you're about to listen to is a conversation between two people for all you know, might be, I don't know, shape-shifting reptiles or something along those lines. It's also going to be a conversation that's general and impersonal in nature, one that will not contain any investment nor professional advice of any sorts. The conversation will, however, contain forward-looking statements, guesses, assumptions, and just general hopes for the future, none of which should be considered a fact or a promise for performance. And that basically means that you should, if you decide to use any of this as advice, you might end up losing all of your money. That's what it means. The mineral exploration, development, and mining industry is just an incredibly tough business where failure is basically the norm, unfortunately, and the only way to avoid that is to know what you're doing. And the only way to know what you're doing is to do your own research and potentially talk to a licensed professional advisor if you can find one. I would also urge you to visit setter.com and use the company's officially filed documents as your main source of information regarding Stuhini Exploration. That all said, Stuhini is a $10.5 million company at the time of recording of this video, with about 46.5 million shares outstanding and about 58 million fully diluted shares, which makes it a 22.5-cent stock, at least again at the time of recording of this video. Those shares are largely held by insiders, so that about 40% of it is held by insiders. And one of those insiders is Eric Sprott. Sprott Global, I believe, is also a shareholder of the company, so next to Eric Sprott himself. Stuhini has in total 8 projects, 4 of which are in Canada, 4 of which are in the US. In Canada, the company has its primary focus, which is the Ruby Creek project in northern BC. And that's probably going to be the focus of the discussion here today as well. As this is an already defined pure play molybdenum deposit, so it is only molybdenum. It's not a copper porphyry with a little bit of molybdenum. It is a molybdenum deposit. There's also a recent resource on it from about I guess a year and a half ago that shows 430 million pounds of molybdenum in the measured and indicated category, and that's at an average grade of 0.05, actually 0.053 to be specific. And there's also another 43.5 million pounds in the inferred category at an average grade of about rounded up to 0.05, which, by the way, the company just on this project, the company recently exercised an option on which resulted in them now owning 100% of this deposit. This is a rather large property, though, so it's spanning over 28,500 hectares. So that means that there are other targets, 4 of which are actually silver targets. But the company says that there's also potential for an orogenic gold discovery on this property as well. And historic drilling has also identified the presence of intrusion-related gold there, which was followed up by Stuhini. And the presence of quartz veinlets was also that contained gold, of course, was confirmed, I believe, last year. Must have been last year. Next to this flagship asset in Canada, Stuhini also has an option to earn 100% interest in a smaller, so that's a 4.2 thousand hectares gold and PGE exploration asset to the north of Ruby Creek, which would technically then be Yukon. So this also probably gives you an idea of where Ruby Creek is. Back in BC, they also have a zinc-lead exploration project, by the way, which is a little bit bigger than the Yukon one. It's at 5,000 hectares. It's also halfway across the country that they have another project all the way in Manitoba. That's actually a huge project, 63,000 hectares. It's a nickel exploration project, a nickel target. It is it's not on the Thompson Belt, but it's south of it. When I guess the team gets too cold in Canada, though, they can also get down to their other projects, which are in the US and in the Arizona desert. I guess to be specific, they're in the Sonoran Desert. I guess that's how we should call it, where they have there's 4 projects, as I said. There's one intrusion-related gold target. There's an orogenic gold target, and there is 2 separate copper porphyry targets in Arizona. There's there's a lot more to say, I guess, but I feel like I'm supposed to give the word to the CEO here, David O'Brien, who, by the way, he takes a $2,000 per month paycheck, and he also sells fly fishing supplies and stuff like that. So I think this is going to be a fun conversation. So, David, thank you for investing your time with me.
Thanks so much. It's an honor to be here. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure is all mine, of course. And I'm looking forward to learning more about the company. What did I miss in the overview, though?
Oh, you did a really good job. I just want to emphasize that 80-90% of our focus is on the molybdenum project. It's quite advanced. It's a very advanced project. It went into construction. The previous operator was Atlin Molybdenum, and in 2006 through 2007, they advanced it through bankable feasibility and permitting and funding and upgraded the road, and they started building the mine. And unfortunately, the financial crisis ensued, and the price of molybdenum collapsed. And they had a large credit facility. I believe it was 600 million US. I'm told it was 800 million Canadian, but they drew 80 million on it, so they had a big debt load, and they eventually went under. And we bought out of the ashes of a bankruptcy, and that's how you do things. Hopefully, you pursue quality assets when they're out of favor. Molybdenum was less than $10 a pound, and we were able to obtain the project.
Let's maybe start there, actually, because you have, as I said, 8 properties, with the molybdenum one being a flagship project that you brought to a resource here. But it doesn't seem like the market cares too much about molybdenum companies, right? There's not all too many of them either. And I don't think you're getting any value for that project at all. So what are you going to do there? Like, is developing that property still your main focus? Because you say it's 90% of your focus, but are you going to be developing it? Or are you looking to do, I don't know, more work on the gold properties and maybe find a strategic partner for the Moly property to work on?
Yeah, we just completed the option, I believe a couple months ago, and we are behind the scenes. We're quite busy. We're right now. It's really difficult times in the junior market right now. We're very fortunate. We're cashed up. We have a lot of hard dollars. We don't need the funding right now. We're able to do the things we want to do, but we want to get a U.S. listing. Get listed in the U.S. to increase our liquidity. During our last financing, I had a lot of U.S. investors come in, and they're not as beaten up as the European, Canadian investors, and they're also perhaps, if you look at the hard asset space, I think there's nothing more attractive than base metals, and we need them. And you can't. Real estate's gone up huge, and stocks gone up huge, but base metals are very depressed, and there's a big disconnect there. But you're right. There's very few companies are getting much value these days, and it's frustrating. Our goal right now is to find a partner for Ruby Creek for sure. We're small, little junior. We need help, and to that avail, we are behind the scenes. We're pretty excited. We're working on a few different initiatives, but we have joined the International Moly Association. We'll be at the AGM in Santiago, Chile. Myself and company chairman Tony Fogarasi. Well, behind the scenes, we've engaged people to help us find a partner, and there's a lot of steel mills and big mining companies that are. Again, I think molybdenum is becoming it's obscure, but it's becoming more mainstream. Last year, Zijin, one of the big Chinese giant, they bought a large molybdenum deposit in China, and if you look at what they paid a pound, it made our market value be 10 times higher than it is. And it's an underground operation grading 0.14, and we're open pit grading 0.053, and but they just talked about molybdenum's the metal of the future, and this is a big giant, known for copper, gold, and segueing into the moly space. I think that's interesting to note. Freeport McMoran in the recent conference call was asked to, comment on why the price of molybdenum has moved up so much, and their comments were simply, it's a very very tight market. And I believe it's a port shut down, a fire at a port in South America, and it was shut down for a couple of weeks, and that alone spiked the price up. So it's an interesting market. It's growing quite rapidly.
Sure. What would a deal look like, though? Potentially, I guess you can't tell me too much, but is it like, are you looking for JV partner? You're going to option it out, or are you looking to sell the deposit but keep the silver targets? I mean, there's multiple opportunities here. What would you do?
Well, that's a question for the board to decide. Obviously, that's a good question. It'll be a good part of our discussions. But right now, when we talk to these potential suitors or agencies that want to help us find a suitor, all of the above. We're looking at a strategic investment. Right now, our market cap's too low. There's no way we're going to sell into the project at these levels. There's no way, especially with the price of molybdenum doing what it's doing. It's at 23.50 last I looked. It's broken out to new highs, and there's so few of these out there. So our whole goal has always been to keep our share structure extremely tight and watch our dollars and monetize this asset. Ideally find a big, well-funded partner to help us advance. There's a lot more that can be done right now. Again, it's pretty well shovel ready. If you look behind me, that's where the project's sort of located. And it's located in a gentle depression. There's no trees to remove. It's ready to go. They started mining it, 2008, and I believe in the early 90s, Placer Developments tried bringing it into construction too. Again, it's a little bit volatile, molybdenum, and we'll talk about that a bit later, but it's because most of it's a byproduct of its pure play. So, but again, whether we sell a portion of the project, whether we take a strategic investment, or even outright sell the project, and we consider anything on the table. But no, my job is to make money for shareholders and create value. But at the same point in time, we're not going to force the position to give it away. And we have a very, very good shareholder base that's well heeled. And when times get tough, we were able to fund ourselves internally.
Molybdenum deposits are tricky to value for me as a shareholder, as a retail investor. I wanted to see because there's not many comparables, right? I mean, if you look at gold projects that got sold, you can say, okay, this is going to get $100 per ounce in the ground or something along those lines. But what do I? How would a buyer? How much would a buyer pay per pound of moly in the ground?
Hard to say. I believe the Zygen transaction, they paid about 75 cents a pound in the ground. Um, well, it was $750 million for a billion pounds. So it is tough to say, and it depends on underground. Ours is unique in that it is a pure play moly deposit. You know, if you look at, for example, the largest molybdenum producer in British Columbia, Teck Resources, with the Highland Valley, and their grade is there's the copper byproduct, and their grade's typically below 0.01, close to 0.01, where we're at 0.053. And if you place the sensitivity analysis, you bring the cutoff from 0.025 to say 0.04, you're still over 300 million pounds. Now your grade's over 0.07. And so it is hard. Ours is very shallow. The one reason of the, we believe there's 4 projects sort of in the Western world, outside of China and potentially out of Freeport, McMoran's realm, because they keep their cards pretty close to their chest. But there's 4 projects, and ours was the only one that did advance through bankable feasibility into construction during the last cycle. And the former operator, Adnec, had a market cap in excess of $250 million. We're sitting at 10 million. The road alone cost $22 million to build. They upgraded the road from a sort of Forest Service road to a haul road. And then once you're at the bottom of the hill, you're 14 kilometers to Atlin, and you can do over 80 kilometers on that gravel road. Then you're paved all the way to Skagway, Alaska. So it's shallow, and it's got, what made it attractive. And again, I have to be very careful because we haven't done a feasibility study. I'm referring to Adnec's feasibility study when they brought the project into construction. But it's got a very shallow starter pit. It's got a very low strip ratio. And it's also, these pure play deposits are very simple metallurgy. You just basically crush the rock and float it into water-based flotation, a little bit of kerosene, but you don't have all the chemical reagents typically associated with a byproduct, the copper byproduct molybdenum. So it's also a purer form of molybdenum, and it's certainly for a rebar and carbon steel, it's not a factor. But for high quality steel and medical steel and nuclear, they need the high purity molybdenum. That's what we'll have, and there's very few of these out there, so it's intriguing.
As I guess as a fellow business owner, me and my wife, I didn't tell you this, but viewers would know, me and my wife, we own a cafe here in Belgium. And so the thing that matters the most for us, which I assume is the case for you as well, is margin. In the end, I mean, how much money do you get to keep after your revenue and all these things? And that's what I don't understand about molybdenum deposits, because this is, well, the deposit is low grade, as in, I mean, I guess it's not low grade for molybdenum out there, but at 1/2 of 1/10 of 1%, it's half a kilogram of moly per ton, which is at the current price, that's about $25-$26 worth of metal in 1 ton. And I don't even know what the recoveries would be, but that's the equivalent of your grade is like 1/2 of 1 gram of gold. So how does this deposit even work in terms of margin?
Well, I think the starter pit being 0.08, and then you convert to Canadian dollars, and you're up around the $50-$60 a ton range. And it was again, it's not our study, and the cost of this is a big problem with our project and so many projects is CapEx has gone up so much.
Yeah.
Certainly the former operators would be delighted with the current price of molybdenum, what it's done. It's just the cost of building has gone up so much. Now, we haven't done a PEA, but we've done our own internal scoping studies. We don't want to deceive anybody. We're close. We're getting close. We've upper 20s, $30. It's really hard to say because, again, we don't have the exact numbers, and we're very conservative with studies. We use high discount rates and low conversion rates to Canadian dollar. That's one thing about our project too, as well, is I highly encourage people to read the technical report associated with our resource update. We hired Stephen Richardelli of MDA, and he did Sierra Gordy. He's very, very conservative. And people say, why would you hire such a conservative firm? Because we don't want to mislead anybody. We want a very reputable conservative firm to do a resource. But the report does state the deposit's open in 3 directions. It's open at depth. Some very, very high grade numbers came out just outside the pit, not part of this 433 million pound pit constrained resource. It's a big beast, and when we go to the shows, we show a sample with big chunky, pure molybdenite in it, and that's taken about a kilometer away from the edge of the deposit. So there's certainly potential for expansion, but again, our market cap is very, very low right now, and it was ready to go as it was. So it doesn't make sense for me to do a $5 or $10 million drill campaign now to expand it and show some, because for example, that high grade potential, one of the holes, 8417, bottomed out in 46 meters of 0.23 moly. That's not 0.023, that's 0.23.
Okay.
And the Zijin transaction in China, whereby they bought a big molybdenum deposit with grades 0.14, I've always stated it's got an underground potential, but it's not part of the pit. It was on the edge of the pit, sort of thing. So there's certainly potential for expansion. And like we only have a few deposits out there, there won't be molybdenum unless these deposits make sense. It's not like you got, the other deposits, like people look at Mount Hope and say, well, their grade's 0.063 and you're 0.053. And these are the top of my head. I go, well, yeah, but their strip ratio is considerably higher. And again, I'm referring to the old ADNAC study, but I believe the overall strip ratio is about 1-to-1. Metallurgy recoveries were 90%. And the starter pit has a strip ratio of 0.65-to-1. And that's what makes sense. You have a higher grade starter pit, you have a low strip ratio, and that's what you pay for it.
What would you have to, because you mentioned metallurgy, what would you have to do, a gravity circuit, or like, what would you have to build in terms of
it's just basically a water flotation circuit. I'm always
okay.
very, very light. It's very, very unique rock. It's not full of sulfides. It's fluorine based. It's not a calcic deposit, and it's very, very unique. It just floats in water, and there was, I believe, in the startup it did 91% metallurgical recoveries, and overall they're about 89.8 or about 90%. So it's very, very good recovery, very simple processing, and it's very clean as well. You don't have a lot of nasty sulfides to deal with, and all mining's dirty, let's face it. But of all the open pit mining you can do, a climax style molybdenum, that's what makes it so unique. These pure play deposits, very, very clean rock, and the runoff is, and your tailings pond's very clean.
Do you have an example of a pure play moly deposit that's currently making money somewhere around the world with comparable grades?
Oh, no. Obviously, the big example, again, there's very few pure play situations out there. It's dominated by Freeport, McMoran with their Climax and Henderson deposits. And I'm told Climax is almost at a war, but it's exceptional Climax. It's 3 times their grade. And it's been in production for 75, 80 years, but it's getting low. And Henderson was a nearby underground discovery. I like to liken on some of the drill results we've had down deep, or grades similar to Henderson. And again, one thing I want to mention too is a lot of our competitors report MOS2 grades, the molybdenite grades. And if you take the MO grade, you have to multiply by 1.66 to get an MOS2 equivalent. You have to compare an apple to an apple. And we're conservative. We don't want to give an MOS2 and bump our numbers up and mislead people. We just write down basics.
Sure. Isn't, because most of the production of molybdenum comes as a byproduct, right, out of South America, I assume. But they have like moly rich zones. So that's sort of the tricky thing that I found with molybdenum. If I understood it correctly, please do correct me if I'm wrong. But when the moly price goes up, these guys, big copper producers, they can go to the moly rich zones of the project and, up their molybdenum production so that they can sell on to higher prices. So that's why the price is so sensitive and so volatile.
I don't think that's true in general. I know, for example, Highland Valley, they're just basically a copper producer, and there might be some seams in there they go back to. What really happens is, like, for example, Thompson Creek is shut down, owned by Centerra, and that's a project that's gonna ramp up construction. Also, Freeport and McMoran are known when molybdenum prices move up, they ramp up construction, or they ramp up production, and that's more what'll happen. But we really respect the CPM group, for example, and they've stated unequivocally that we have to go to pure plate molybdenum deposits. We can't rely on copper byproducts. And people think all copper mines have this molybdenum byproduct. That's not true. And the next generation of copper mines, at least so we've been told by some very reputable people that don't particularly have, it's only the copper projects along the Pacific subduction zone from the bottom of South America to Alaska. For example, Comoe in Africa has no copper, and so many of these Ontario is sort of VMS type deposits probably there's no molybdenum in Africa, and Europe has no molybdenum. It's quite unusual. It's kind of a North American based and Chinese based metal, and we don't know that much about China, but and even if you look at molybdenum right now, the International Moly Association just put out their numbers, and consumption went from 611 million pounds in 2021 to 630 million pounds in 2022, and they've stated they believe it'll be a billion pound a year market by 2050. What is our 433 million pounds going to do to that market? It's just enough for less than 6 months, right? It's not like Ruby Creek will be built or Mount Hope will be built and so all the world's problems will be solved. It's an interesting metal, and the World Bank stated, I believe it was 2020, I've got the link somewhere, that of 9 green energy initiatives, copper and molybdenum involved with 7 to 9 of them. So it's exciting, and I don't want to hang my hat on what might happen, but certainly the demand outlook looks interesting. And again, there's not a lot of supply, and there's not a lot of choices. Like you said, you can take gold deposits or copper deposits, get a spreadsheet, and look at dozens, if not hundreds, of companies. For molybdenum, it's just a handful. There's not many of them out there. And it's not an obscure metal. It's I think 630 million pounds is a fairly large market.
I think though that some of the other moly companies that I looked at when the molybdenum price spiked this spring, I think that some of them do actually talk molybdenite instead of molybdenum specifically, so MO2. So I think that might have to, yeah. But how much?
Yeah.
How do I let me ask it. I'm trying to figure out how much should this be worth, right? That's the main question here. Like if I stole the deposit from you and I ask you for ransom, how much you want to pay me?
It's all, yeah. I mean, right now it's hard for me. Again, I got to be careful what I say, but I right now wouldn't consider selling the project for any less than say 30 million US. There's, and what would it cost you to drill all the holes out, to build the road, to do all the work that's already been done? North of 100 million. Just 339 holes, and the road upgrade alone was $22 million in 2008, and I'm told today it'd be probably over $30 million to upgrade the road to a haul road, right? So a lot of work's been done, right? Again, it's shovel ready and we're ready to go.
So if I understand correctly, it's not really a question as to is this deposit sellable? It's more of is there a buyer? Because if somebody's looking for molybdenum in Canada, they pretty much come to you. But then that somebody has to be existent, I guess.
Yeah, and again, the former owner of this private owner of this project had a lot of interest in the Chinese. It was basically sold, and Sino-Canadian relations fell apart, and the deal fell apart. And thank God, now we have the project. But I truly believe if Sino-Canadian relationships were better, this would have been sold, and it would be sold, because they're a lot more visionary. They're looking 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road. They know there's so few of these things out there. And whereas North Americans and typically Europeans, we're just looking day to day. And they understand that. And apparently they wanted to build a mine. They'd done all the numbers and done all their studies. They wanted to commence construction because they realized even if we started on the EAC today, we probably wouldn't be, at least 5 years away. And it's a tight and ever tightening market. And again, there might be some breakthroughs. If you Google molybdenum batteries, it's like very interesting. They talk about up to 4 times the capacity. People tell me they're going to be using molybdenum solar panels. And what excites me more than anything is Dr. Hardy Morbicker, I've spoken to. He's an expert in the space. He talked about how the Germans are lightening the weight of their autos by adding more and more molybdenum to the building process. Because the number one use for molybdenum, 39% of molybdenum, is lightening and strengthening steel. When you add molybdenum to steel, it's stronger. You go to thinner wall, you lighten it up. And we all know how heavy electric cars are. The ranges are limited. And so there's some exciting potential. And right now, at least according to the numbers from the International Molybdenum Association, which I trust very well, most of the growth is in the wind turbines. The gearboxes need to be durable and withstand the elements for up to 25 years and have a very high moly concentrations. Alistair Neal did a study, and I think it was 130 kilograms per megawatt. So the big in the North Sea, those big wind towers, each of them use 1.5 tons of molybdenum for the gearboxes to make them durable. And there's a problem just to reach the gearboxes, the trusses, the cranes. That's an awful lot of molybdenum as well, right? So that's, when you think of molybdenum, it's a lightweight steel.
But so back to your project, to Ruby here. You're not doing anything else on it in 2023. I don't assume. I think you have about $2 million in cash, but you probably don't want to. I mean, you probably want to be careful with that.
Well, we do, but we're also we're spending money on other projects. We are spending money in Atlin right now. Where we want to. I haven't put news out, but we obviously want to keep moving the project forward, and it's already been through environmental assessment in the past. So we'd like to do a data review and look at all the old data because an awful lot of data points were collected, and work with the local band, the local First Nation, the Taku River Lincoln, and perhaps look at that. But we can't open up the EAC can of worms right yet because it's too expensive. And suddenly we have some really, really big bills in our hand. That's why we need a partner, and there's a lot of propositions. And again, a lot of steel companies look for offtakes and things like that. And we're certainly not a big investment. I mean, if someone's going to take a strategic interest in Stuhini, they're not going to blow up their balance sheet and have to go to their board and have a vote or something. It's just pocket change really for some of the big boys. And we have reached out to a lot of companies in the past, and a few of them said, well, get the project first. So now we have it, right? So now we can find a partner in earnest. And again, our market cap's too low, so we want more of a strategic investment right now. And obviously, if someone comes along, that the money would go towards the molybdenum deposit. And what's interesting, our Ruby Creek tenors are over 29,000 hectares. Whereas the molybdenum lease, about 3,500 hectares. That's the permitted area. And outside of that, it's highly prospective for gold and silver, but it's early stage greenfields. And you'll notice we made a lot of silver discoveries, including silver surprise, where I believe there's 5 samples over 10,000 grams. And these are surface samples. They haven't been drilled, but they're narrow veins and we can see them. But it's certainly intriguing, and there are possible parallel veins and potential for extension of strike there. And these need to be drilled, but again, it's hard for me to justify drilling for early stage greenfield silver with the low market cap, especially given what molybdenum's done. Understand, when we got this project, moly was under $10 a pound, and we were more of a call option on molybdenum. And now moly's, in 2021, the price of moly went to $14 a pound. At which point I said, hey, time to redo the resource, because exchange, even though the last resource update done by ADNAC was certainly 43101 compliant, it was over 10 years old. It's a new project for us. Exchange wants to do our own resource updates. So you throw the other one out the window and hire a firm like we did and start from scratch. It was a very interesting process, and do the resource update. So we've done that. So yes,
that's something that I also wanted to talk about, because it almost seems scary to me to base a whole business on a commodity that is as volatile as molybdenum is. It seems like the price is staying at an interesting spot right now, but you look at your own share price. Obviously, you started off the year nicely because late last year moly price started moving, then you doubled, and then you've given all that back now. And so managing that, you raised capital at the right point, so congratulations, well done on that, of course. But had you not done it, you would have been in much in challenging waters, so to say. So that
and I'm an investor, right? People understand. Like I've for the last 35 years, I've been a venture capitalist in the Vancouver area. I don't like a lot of what I see. For example, last year I took $24,000 in salary, and my wife and I wrote $185,000 in checks. I know, again, that this project has some value to it. It's not just it's certainly more than a market cap, but everyone's undervalued right now. I mean, I like friends of mine that own good quality gold covered resource in the ground trading at 3 cents a share. The markets are very depressed right now. People are desperate for liquidity. It's summer as well. And our share structure is very tight. And, we have almost 40% insider, but a large portion of our shareholders are longtime fly shop customers of mine that I've known for many, many years. They're not your typical venture capitalists that watch the ticker every day. They're just, Dave, let me know when you sell. I'll sell when you sell, type of thing. I said, well, there'll be some sort of a move on, whether we sell the project outright or bring in a partner. There'll be liquidity events down the road for my shareholders. But I've been accused of running a private business, but the markets are very frustrating now for everybody. But it's not worth spending a whole lot of energy on it when it's very, very depressed in summertime and no one's returning calls. And but I do know that I was recently in Kelowna speaking to a lot of investors, and they're intrigued. They're a big portion of our duty is to inform people about molybdenum, about how big the market is, how fast it's growing, that there's few choices out there. Again, people say, well, your project's too low grade. Well, what else is there? And the other projects are similar, and obviously Malberg in Greenland is exceptional grade. It's about double our grade, but it's in Greenland. And we're road accessible and there's a port nearby. So and also the capex and OPEX. Same with copper. Like so many great copper projects have stalled right now because copper has to go higher to make these things economic. The cost of building both capex and OPEX have gone up so much. If you look at the previous operator, I believe the cost of the mine the ore was $2 a ton. The cost of process was $5 a ton. So $7 a ton. There's some margin there, you know. Obviously, that's not the case today, but it made sense back then, and there's a feasibility study behind it. So I think people should read it.
It's interesting that you should mention that a lot of your shareholders are clients and pretty much friends of yours. How much of the stocks you think you can locate right now? How much of those 46 million? Because 40% is insiders, so that's located.
I think we're at least 60% is tucked away. You know, it's just long-term shareholders. The flow is probably about 4. But again, that's just approximately. But you know, I see when people subscribe to financings, I do all the financings. I don't charge the company finder's fees or anything, and we pay very low finder's fees. We do most of the finance ourselves, and I see they have to disclose their holdings, and so I keep rough track of that. And it's very few have sold at all. And again, I do a lot of damage control now, and you know, the last people, I had some pretty big people come in at 40 cents, and they've assured me they'll help out when the time's right. I'm fairly confident, and I can buy some stock myself too. I'm a venture capitalist. I'm not afraid, and you'll see me in the market if necessary to help with the stock. But you have to be careful doing that too, right? And come in at the right time. And I would rather come in for financings and help out for exploration. We certainly want to be more aggressive next year. But again, we've got a 2-year budget where we can survive for a couple of years right now. We had to build a budget to make sure. Plus, we're still doing work. Like we're doing some, what we're up to right now. We'll be back in Atlin. We'll be, looking into a data review, or might be doing a little more staking. We were told these things come in clusters. We did a little more staking last year, and we're going to be checking out occurrence, porphyry, sort of a granite hosted occurrence nearby as well. If you look at Climax and in Colorado, there's a cluster of deposits in the area. Again, Freeport, they keep the cards pretty close to the chest.
How do you even get that done yourself? I mean, you own your shop, and on top of that, I mean, it's molybdenum, it's gold, copper, lead, zinc, nickel, and a bunch of different deposit styles too, from intrusion related through orogenic to VMS, and even a potential porphyry in the US, completely different country, way off from where we are right now. So where'd you even find the time or the team that has enough understanding of all that to manage this whole thing? Like, how do you even do it? I don't even know what to ask.
Yeah, I work hard, and at the fly shop, I've certainly taken a backseat role. I was supposed to put 20% of my time in Stuhini. It's more like 80. But I'm very blessed at the fly shop. You're only as good as your people. And in my fly fishing business, I got amazing managers and amazing staff, and I'm basically the controller. I help with a bit of purchasing and a bit of marketing, but that's about it. And I love teaching. I do the teaching, but other than that, I'm not there. I come in the evenings and do the books. I have an amazing team. I'm very blessed to have a very talented team at Stuhini. My VP Exasan, I can't say enough about him. I think there's a lot of there's other projects too, and all of our work behind the scenes. Charles Camember, our corporate secretary, is a retired securities lawyer. He's very, very useful. We're busy right now on a lot of initiatives behind the scenes, and I have a very good counsel in Vancouver. Our counsel has become a shareholder who loves our project, loves the way we run our company. We have a good advisory board, smart people. And again, we've recently done some work on another project, and we hired a top-notch firm because to help us with some work, right? And at times we have, our Asan, our VPX is at University of British Columbia. He was working on his master's program. All the young students look up to him, so we kind of take the cream of the crop. And 2 years ago, I had 16 employees in Atlin. And again, we were more greenfields, looking at silver and looking at gold, and doing a lot of mapping and doing a lot of soil sampling on the other targets.
Well, those people are not working for $2,000 a month, I don't think. Where does your G&A stand today?
Our G&A, our VPX is obviously the most expensive, but I believe he about $110,000 a year for a VPX, and that's low. But our G&A we can probably get by about $350,000 a year. We just sort of batten down the hatches and just pay a sign and just watch our costs, and it's very, very low. And I believe no one can survive these days even if you lay off all your staff for less than 125 to 100 audit fees and exchange fees and certain legal fees in your AGM and a little bit of marketing. But it's but certainly we're lean and mean. We use one of my fly fishing businesses in Vancouver as our office. There's no charge. I don't charge the company for that. And again, none of us take consulting fees on the side or any of the games played. And again, these are things that I kind of don't like about the junior markets. And really, when I built Stuhini, I kind of built it like we're value investors. We acquire assets when they're cheap and they're out of favor. And if you look at our zinc project, for example, we'll talk about that shortly. It's a potentially very large project. We got for nothing. If you look at our Manitoba nickel project, was a big interest that we staked that ourselves. You look at Ruby Creek, we bought it when no one cared about moly, and I knew, hey, that's a world class deposit, and I was able to get an option on it for a back end loaded option, very attractively. It's not going to kill the company. So that's what you do. We're value investors, and watch our dollars really, really carefully. And we have a very low share count, and the idea is we want to monetize this molybdenum, whether we bring in a partner, whether we sell it outright. I mean, I'm very frustrated right now too. Maybe we would consider an outright sale, right? But again, I don't speak on behalf of the board, and also our chairman Tony Fogras is extremely talented, extremely, and offers me a lot of guidance, and I take guidance whenever I can get it, because again, I'm very proud of my fly fishing business, because I built the best in class. I'm told it's the best fly fishing business in Canada, and it's world class. And our you try and bring that business acumen. A lot of these people, there might be brilliant geologists and brilliant engineers, but they never run a business. You try surviving in retail, and your favorite hobby over all the years, and how it's changed so much, and what we used to sell we no longer sell, and a lot of it's about staffing and having a very positive attitude and have a quality experience. And again, it's multi-talent, but I've always been a team builder and a value investor, and I want to bring that acumen to Stuhini, and I think we're doing a good job.
I can definitely agree with that last statement that you said about the business B, because it's the same for me. When I got into the hospitality business, I didn't get into it because it was easy. I got into it because I thought it would be easy, but it's not. And so I'm feeling that firsthand now, and I know where you're coming from. How involved is Eric Sprott? Like, did you talk to him about? I guess he's a good person to talk to when it comes down to raising capital, making deals. But how involved is he?
Eric's just a silent investor. He's participated in 5 or 6 financings. We're fortunate. I know that the vendor, when he was going to sell it, that one of Sprott's companies had made a lot of inquiries about what he was. Yeah, I believe he had a deal done with the Chinese. It fell apart. He got kind of frustrated. The price backed off. I'll just sell it. We were just listing. I said, "What about us?" He says, "Well, exchange will never allow it. It's a non-arm's length transaction." Because he's a co-founder, and there was a way, and we had to, it was tricky, but we got exchange approval. But when I approached Eric, and I'll throw $100,000, which is a small investment at the time, but we were only raising $300,000 or $400,000. He gave me a lead order, and almost every financing, whenever I need to raise money, I usually go to Eric first and approach him and let him know what's up. And last time I was caught off guard. One of his associates called me up and said Eric wants to make a large investment this time. But the price of moly started shooting up. We were just trying to survive late last year. I mean, moly was $18 a pound. We had to make a $300,000 option payment. We had a lot of flow through left in the bank. We were low on hard dollars, and internally amongst our group, we were able to scrape by and get it. And suddenly the price of moly started moving up, and so we bumped. That was one of the reasons our stock backed off. We had a 23-cent financing overhang in the market. Yeah, we did a 40-cent financing, but we just closed at 23. But as the price of moly started skyrocketing in the mid-30s, my phone rang off the hook, and I think we had raised a lot more than the 2.4 million I raised. But at the time, I thought we're going to go a lot higher too, right? It was obviously with moly in the mid-30s, we're pretty happy. It's not there now, and that's a pretty, for any commodity to go from $18 to $36 in 3 or 4 months, that's very unusual. And again, that's part of the intrigue of molybdenum, because it's a byproduct of copper. Moly demand doesn't equal moly supply. And I've talked to Kerry Knoll in the past, and he explained to me that he took Thompson Creek for a 20-cent junior to $40 stock, and Centerra paid over $1 billion for Thompson Creek. But in the early 2000s, the pipeline build out in the Western Sedimentary Basin here in Canada, pipelines are very molybdenum intensive as well, especially with sour gas and buried pipelines because of corrosion resistance. And it really spiked up the demand for molybdenum, and suddenly the price skyrocketed, right? But it does show you that it's a unique market. And if any of these initiatives they're working on come through, my shareholders will be very, very happy. And again, I'm not basing on any assumptions of what might happen, all the exciting, research going on with molybdenum. We have to look at the cold facts, and that's the market right now as it is.
I agree. You can't really build a company only on expectations. Otherwise, you risk becoming a land bank or an option, pretty much, or something along those lines. So those $350K that you mentioned for G&A, what is that? Does that include marketing?
Yeah. That'd be about a $50,000 marketing budget.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you do? I saw that you're going to the Metals Investor Forum. I think you're working with, I don't know if you're still working, but I do assume with Bob Moriarty. You were working with him last year.
No, we just sponsor advertising on Bob's website, and he had a little blurb about us. But his blurb was mainly about the intrusion gold. And people got really excited when we drilled some intrusion gold, and it didn't work out last year. I defend my team. Obviously, when ADNAC was advancing the project, they have to do what's called condemnation drilling, and in the area of the tailings pond, some of the condemnation holes to kit granted hosted gold, and obviously the you know the up until 2022, up 2021 and prior, the largest placer camp in Canada was at Atlin, and the 10 significant placer creeks in Atlin. The 7 of the 10 are within our tenors, and again, that's completely underexplored. But orogenic gold is, shrink mining isn't that popular anyway. But there's certainly some high grade gold. And what brought me up to Atlin, and I think it was 2017, there's some bedrock discoveries on Otter Creek where the placer operators found gold still in the bedrock. It was very, very spectacular. It's quite interesting too, because it wasn't found in the listenites and the volcanics. It was found in sediments and a fillet horizon, and it's quite interesting. And the BC Geological Society came up and wrote a book, and so we have to visit all these placer camps and revisit them. And maybe we're looking for the wrong rock sources to find out where it came from. But again, it's very confusing because every placer creek's got electrum. Sometimes it's 50-50, sometimes it's 85-15, sometimes it's young nuggets, sometimes it's old nuggets. You almost need AI and they do a study alone just on the gold aspects, but that was the intrusion gold. Plus, you have to make sure if you're going to building a tailings pond, you're not building a tailings pond on a deposit, right? And plus the holes we drilled will be very useful for the tailings pond. Certainly, the feasibility study has been done on a project by the prior operator. And when we read the new operators or wherever it is, whether it's us or a partner or what have you, redo the feasibility. A lot of things don't have to be done, but given Mount Poly, the tailings disaster there, what happened to Vale in Brazil, there'll definitely be more, and maybe have to do dry stack nowadays too. There's just a lot of rules have changed the last 15 years, right? As far as operating goes, so it's good to have those numbers. But I always defend my team. They thought was right.
Okay, so what else are you spending money on this year? Are you going down to the US doing something there?
Yeah, we had our teams down in the U.S. early this year. We sent teams down there and did some work, and it was early stage. And there's definitely the two projects, or the one project in particular has copper porphyry potential, possibly buried. But I'll be honest with you, the next potential phase of operations is quite expensive, probably an airborne flyover. So we got to be careful about that too, because again, capital scarce these days, and certainly my shareholder base. If I have $500,000 to spend, I believe there's other areas we'd spend it on. Certainly, we'd like to, that one hole 84-17 that bottomed out in that super high grade. We'd like to continue on and see how big that is, and twin it and go deeper, and then step out to the left or right. Again, I don't make those decisions. My geological team makes those decisions, and we bring consultants into it to help us with that. And we have a zinc project in southern BC, and it's a large sort of like Selwyn, it's a SEDEX. The SEDEX deposit. It's like about 12 kilometers long. And if you look at our claims in southern BC, they're big ledge. Within the claims, Teck Resources has a fair amount of Crown Grant claims. I believe there's about 100 million ton resource there, 4% zinc, probably 5% zinc equivalent, including about 10 million pounds of 7% zinc, potentially about 9% equivalent. And we believe the mineralized structures extend onto our land, and certainly the geophysics shows that. But we don't want to be just go blindly drilling. We have to do things very systematically, and hopefully be news on that. But working hard behind the scenes there. We've had teams there as well. And again, Teck would be a tough nut to crack. They're a very smart company, and they're tough to negotiate with. And we're not gonna give anyone a big chunk of Stuhini down at these levels. We're just not gonna, like a big senior. We're not gonna, we're a little bit vulnerable right now. But no one can take a run at us either, right? With our tight share structure. So
Sure.
we're not loosely held. Right?
And you said you said you can locate more than half of the stock. So that's, I mean, that's encouraging too regarding that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's not just that. It's a lot of our shareholders are fairly well heeled, and when times got tough last year, that people can write the checks, right, when it has to. And we were forced to do a cheap financing even last year. I didn't want to do financing 23, but it all went to mainly existing shareholders and friendly shareholders, right? And that's very important too, right? If you ever get vulnerable, that you can keep that stock tight, right?
Sure. Yeah, sure is.
You don't want
They,
to, you rely on a hedge fund or even an unscrupulous broker, and you become very, very vulnerable. And the problem nowadays, they see so many juniors, they don't raise money tactfully. You see a stock at 15 cents, and word on the street gets they need money, and suddenly they're trading at 7, 8 cents, and they announce an 8 cent financing and reprice it at 6 type of thing, and you've just completely destroyed your share structure. So I see that an awful lot in these markets these days, and it's frustrating for me as an investor too.
hmm. It absolutely is the case. As an investor, I can say that same thing. But you probably don't want to do, or I'm thinking that's maybe a question. You probably don't want to do too much in terms of transactions before you put out at least a PEA on a PEA on Ruby, because if you put out a PEA on Ruby, that's potentially gonna help the stock go up and give your other projects another valuation, or at least help people see the other projects in a different light, basically. So
but I'll be honest with you there. We have our own internal numbers. And again, we believe the price needs to be a little bit higher to put out a PEA. It's a $500,000 decision. And we've done our own scoping studies. And again, we use some really conservative variables, and we're not far off. But we're not the only one. All these copper projects I see in limbo. And I also think a lot of companies that are bantering around with 2 and 3-year-old PEAs and IRRs, they're going to get sued, because look what happened to Argo Gold and these people. When you go to build a mine, the costs have gone up so much, especially the last couple of years, right? Now that could back off a little bit because there's not as much construction going on and things back off. It's a cycle, right? So we have our own internal numbers, and obviously we get a partner, we'll share them with them, but we're not far off, and you could potentially, the guys from MDA who helped us the project, they believe we go 30,000 ton a day, which is fairly large. You go at the starter pit, potentially maybe start 10,000 ton a day and go up to the sweet spots and do things on a smaller scale. It doesn't have to, so we have to explore different scenarios, and obviously we have to explore the underground perhaps and add it to the, again, I don't want to speculate or, be far-fetched, but, 0.24% Molly underground is very high grade. You can make a lot of money with that. So it changes, but might change the economics. So a lot of things that might change it, right? And again, it's not like we're going to buy the other project that's much higher grade, or that's find me a road accessible, shallow project, pure play. And there's not out there, right? There's very few of them out there. So that's what makes us unique, right?
I suppose so. Although I had the impression that a PEA would be in the book, so probably not for 2023. But I think I had assumed that you would want to get that done, maybe next year.
Yeah, well, we've done a scoping study and parts of a PEA, and we're even looking at things like potentially leasing instead of buying the mill equipment. And there's even maybe some inexpensive mill equipment nearby we could get to really change the cost, right? There's a lot of different ways of enhancing the numbers. But again, the bottom line is, like our project, like so many others, the cost of building's gone up considerably. And again, these type of numbers would really have made sense back in the day. If you look at the old study, they're predicting $18 Molly for a few years and steady state Molly around $10 a pound. It all made sense. Now it wouldn't be the case. You need steady state Molly of probably $20 a pound, and probably a price up in the above $30 to get started, right? And again, it's got to make sense, right? And back in the day, the bankers, there was an $800 million credit facility arranged for this project, and the bankers do their homework, right? Again, the numbers did make sense back in the day, so I think people should look at the study. And again, it's a very simple crush and float, still water based, bit of kerosene, bit of diesel, but not all the reagents. And one of the guys who works for the BC government, we're at the show recently, came by our booth, said, "I used to work for Placer on your project." He says, "If one hole needs to be in BC, it's yours." And he jokingly made a comment, "Oh, your tailings pond, you're making a sandy beach lake for the residents of Atlin." And you can't swim in Atlin. It's pretty cold up there. We're near the Yukon, but it's a very clean, environmentally friendly. And also, I got to be careful about bantering about ESG, but certainly I'm very proud of my team. It's very, very diverse. I've got women, I have First Nations. My VPX is Persian background. I'm Japanese. We're all, very different, but it's all done organically. It's not like, oh, I have to get this person, I have to bring that person. It's just done organically. The best people have been hired. We've also got, green energy metal. And if you look at our nickel project in Manitoba, there's a 165-meter intercept of 0.32 from back in the day. And that's a big swatch, and it needs to be followed up. And you look at a big zinc project in southern BC, you can stand on a mineralized structure and see power. as opposed to these projects they're developing a little higher grade in the Yukon that are very, very remote, right? And again, it's we have all those criteria we meet, but our deck isn't full of banter about Elon Musk said this and lithium this and the car. It's just all what have you got, right? And I believe we have the goods. All of our projects are chances of being big world class mines. They're all road accessible. They're all realistic, right? So again, I'm proud of what we've assembled and where we sit.
What are you most proud of, I guess? What are you most excited about moving forward? Besides Ruby, obviously, out of those projects, is it one of those in the US or is it another one?
No, I'm all proud of my team, and I am obviously Ruby Creek is our crown jewel, I believe. And again, it's just an asset that we're just it comes down to timing. Like I talked to Jack Stock, he's been a mentor of mine. He said, Dave, you're doing everything right. Your time will come. We thought it came last year. And obviously, the one part of this game is people have to realize the ebbs and flows, and you raise money when the tide comes in. When the tide's going out right now, do I really want to spend a whole bunch of money marketing and traveling the world and telling my story when there's few people listening? And cash is important, but also we're to it. I'm not happy with the share price, right? But I'm most proud of my team. I have a very amazing team, and they work hard. And I'm very, very proud of my team and the people that our advisors and people we surrounded ourselves with. And again, I think the cream will rise to the top, and I'm very confident about our company going forward. And for me, I find it's just when I talk to investors and sit down one-on-one, they tend to get interested. And if anything, I was just talking to a bunch of investors. I said, listen, the one thing I want you to, when molybdenum wakes up, remember us. And also, one of our big jobs is to just educate people about molybdenum, that it's fairly common, and every single piece of steel you look at has molybdenum in it. And all the high quality, the modern steel calls for more molybdenum. And another thing too, and again, I got to be careful when I say these things, is that when I listened to Freeport McMoran's recent conference call, and they asked him, would you comment on the price spike in molybdenum? They just basically said it was a very tight market. One of the analysts called and says, is this your high purity molybdenum or your regular molybdenum? That's what we have. We have this high purity molybdenum that's because it's climax styles pure play and the reagents are required. The end product is a higher purity product. So that's another thing that might be a factor. And again, I don't want to mislead anybody. I don't know enough about it, but certainly joining the International Molybdenum Association, which we've done, getting down to the AGM. The last day, they're getting a big talk about moly supply and demand, very, very detailed. These guys are very pro grade, just like the, Andrew Zemek and the CPM group. They're very, very, very pro grade. They, you watch the interview and he says, we need to go to pure play moly deposits. We can't rely on byproduct copper. It's just not going to work. And I read an article from Science Direct stating that molybdenum's the planet's going to run out of molybdenum within 75 years. There's just not enough of it. They have to find a way to recycle it from steel. Surely now they melt the steel down. They don't got the moly in it, but they have no way of actually recycling out of the steel yet. And perhaps one day there'll be a way, right?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Recycling with these things is tough. What happens with other metals too? That's an interesting one. But I agree with you. You have to be out there. You have to be educating people about the moly market, and you have to be out there promoting as well. Is that something you plan on doing more this year? Like I don't know, visiting European conferences or trying something else in terms of promotion?
Yeah, I really want to get outside of Canada. I had my phone rang and I had several U.S. investors take interest, and I think that people, Americans, for example, realize inflation's probably here to stay. You can print dollars, you can't print copper, you can't print molybdenum. And again, if you look at all the hard assets out there, real estate, stock market, base metals stand on like the sort of them, they're so cheap and they're so important. And I listened to Jeremy Grantham recently talk about inflation and commodities, and I really like what he had to say. He said that we've taken resource for granted the last 100 years. Resources are now going to be very, very valuable because all the high grade projects, all the shallow projects, all the sweet stuff's already been mined. And the next generation of all these, whether it's copper, nickel, molybdenum, are typically lower grade, deeper, more difficult metallurgical recoveries, higher altitude, riskier political jurisdictions. The world's a big wake-up call is coming. If everyone wants this great green energy world, they don't want mining. They don't realize that you need 10 times the mining. And then these big copper deposits that are high grade, they're very depleted now. And that's in particular what the CPM group talked about when they talked about molybdenum. They said that copper deposits don't particularly have molybdenum, and the next generation coming down the pipes don't have enough to supply the markets. This is why we have to go to these pure plays. So the markets will take care of themselves, just like copper. Copper has to move up from these levels to higher levels to make these projects economic, to allow companies to do their PEAs and do their feasibility studies and drill them. Most copper juniors don't even have funding for drilling right now, even with good projects. It's the market's not properly. There's a big mistake I believe the market's making in commodities, and now is the time for investors to look at us with a $9 million enterprise value. It's not a huge risky gamble to. It's a great way to play a space of an interesting metal, and there's certainly not a lot of downside, right?
Hmm. So, but more specifically, what are you going to be doing to? Because it's not something like gold or uranium or copper that people just know about. How do you determine what's a good return on investment, on marketing investment dollars for you to go to a conference or go to, I don't know, a roadshow or whatever you do? How are you going to determine that?
That and Tony, is $1 million decision question, and I find it interesting because being a businessman all my life, and I can run a public company. The biggest challenge is marketing. And people call me up all the time and tell me I got all these investors that want to write checks and hear your story, but just pay me $10,000 a month. And you're typically wasting your money. And I've learned a lot. And obviously having Eric Sprott, I've had a few really important strategic investors come into our last financing. We've got Chen Lin's been supporting us, the newsletter community. But I definitely want to hit the U.S. market a lot harder and show up at the U.S. conferences. And I think for us, it's really concentrating on trying to present. Because if I can present to an audience and we show our project, and show what we've done, and show where it's located, that typically helps quite a bit. And so I want to hit the road, but you also got to wait till the markets are a little bit better. And I believe the U.S. That's why I'm targeting the U.S. because they're not as blown up and they're more intrigued. Whereas Canadian and a lot of European junior miner type guys are afraid right now. They're hiding under a rock. I've got over 50 positions. I've been doing this all my life, and I'm pretty successful. But I do lots of financings. I'm very, very sophisticated. To me, it's all management. The most important thing in this market, I tell people, number one is management. You better have competent management that can watch your dollars. And also, because I don't want to get into it, but there's a lot of stealing that goes on. A lot of very bad things happen, and shareholders aren't aware of it. And I've seen that all my life. I've been a shareholders' rights activist, and that's exactly why we formed a company. I don't like the way they're run. And again, you can't put a little junior together, have 3 people drawing 6-figure salaries, having steak dinners every night, traveling first class, and expect to get any value. And that's exactly what we don't do, and why our share count is low, and why we have money in the bank. And you watch every dollar, right? We recently, the auditors, we gently pushed back. We're upset that we paid quite a bit more for the audit this year. They dropped the price by $5,000. To me, that's a big win. Putting our money in GICs and getting an extra percent, those are big wins, right? And again, every penny counts, right? Counting your paper clips and all. Again, that's from you and I run private businesses, and every single penny counts, right? And you have to use that. And whereas a lot of people, I just get blown away by marketing people. This is extra service is only this much, or I'll give you 10 more meetings for $10,000. Goes, that's $1,000 a meeting. I like paying $250 a meeting. And I have outreach programs going now, and I talk to people every week, investors on Zoom, and I call our existing shareholders and spend time with them. And I do believe we'll have really good support down at these levels, because I know some pretty well-heeled people have told me though they're willing to open up the bank checks down here, and I think we're certainly at the bottom here. But you never know. The markets are the markets, and right now these are. We've been in a 15-year bear market for metals really since mid-2007. And these are amongst the most difficult markets I've ever seen. And people are so desperate for liquidity. And we have a 40-cent financing coming free trading, and people are clipping 23 and 24-cent bids after 4 months. And so be it. You need money, and you're willing to, grab half a warrant. But it's very interesting times right now, and there's a lot of desperation. Again, a lot of things don't make sense, but it's always darkest before dawn. And me as an investor, I'm licking my chops because I just see such great opportunity. And in particular in the precious metal space, valuations are absurd right now. So we'll see.
They should make it obligatory for people who want to be junior mining CEOs to have run a small business first before they can do it, because it's absolutely true, watching every penny. And it's funny you should say that now, because recently me and my wife, we were picking new paper cups for the cafe, and we're like, okay, do we take the 7 cents one or the 8 cents one? And it's like you're literally watching the pennies there, because eventually it could end up mattering. Maybe not that exact decision, but the way you make decisions, the thinking behind making those decisions.
Exactly. It's like us. So we want to spend money. We need to move our projects forward. I mean, obviously the molybdenum right now, it doesn't make sense for me to go to a lot of drilling, but it makes sense to, get T equals zero moving forward, right? How quickly can this thing be developed, right? That's why we maybe looked back at the environmental and getting back on the data review and moving that forward, and also finding a partner. So we're very active on behind the scenes there, and we'll be up there this year too, and looking at potentially staking some more land. But our other projects, we got budgets for them. And one of our projects right now, we had a $150,000 budgeted, and we hired a firm to do the work. And right now we're sitting, $50,000 under budget, right? That's a big win, right? And we can also get a 20% refund, a mineral exploration tax credit refund in northern BC, and a 30% in southern BC with the zinc, because the government rules. There's a pine beetle infestation in southern BC, and you get a 30% refund. So again, we can get refunds on work done as well. But again, it's effectively spending the money right now, keep an ample treasury, because we don't know how long the storm's going to last. There's a storm out there right now, and it's very difficult, and it's quite irrational. And I see the Dow reaching new highs, almost up every day, and there's a big disconnect out there, and they're chasing stocks just because they're going up and not even looking. Oh, it's only trading at 180 times earnings, or it's trading at 11 times revenue, and these ridiculous valuations, and people are willing to pile money into that stuff, but they won't go near a resource play, right? So,
Yeah.
That'll change, right?
Mm. If someone comes along and gives me like 1/10 of that, like if someone gives me 18 times earnings for McAfee, I'd probably kiss their feet. That's just not how the real world works.
Exactly, especially the private sector. I have friends of mine sell private sector, very profitable business, been around for 20 years. They're likely to get 4.5 times earnings in the private market. And yet, if
Exactly.
they're publicly listed, they probably trade at 12 or 14 times earnings, right?
Correct. Yeah.
I have a friend who's got a brilliant AI business, and they're doing all the banks in Canada, now the US, and they're private, and they have people phoning them, and they're offering ridiculous valuations, right? So
Mm.
interesting times. And when you look at that kind of money being available, but a junior miner has to stand on his hands to raise $50,000 right now, right? Even with a quality project, right? And again, that's back what I say to people: is number one, management's the most important thing. And my motto as an investor is, once a crook, always a crook too, because I've been burnt too many times, and there's people I trust and people I don't. And my favorite companies to invest in are companies run by really bright CEOs who can watch the dollars. They're bright geologists, can do multitasking and work on reports, and they can file this and file that and save the company a lot of money. But at the same point, then we have to have the goods. A bunch of arm waving, and Elon Musk said we need lithium. I got an early stage lithium play that's on trend with something. That doesn't work right now. I want to see a resource, the gold projects. I want to see a measured and indicated resource. I want to make sure it makes sense. I want to like the jurisdiction. But get something with meat on the bones with management you touch. And that's the opportunities are very abundant right now.
Hmm. I'm just curious. You said you have 50 positions. Are there any molybdenum positions among those?
No. There's one MLY. It's halted, and it's a lithocap project. It's got the moly won't be developed for probably 50 years, but the cap above it is it's a sort of a zinc gold cap sitting above it, and it's also in the States. And to me, the U.S. is a really risky jurisdiction to get approval. Obviously, Nevada and Arizona and potentially New Mexico, but those are the only states I'll invest in earnest. But no, there are, obviously my money's where my mouth is. My biggest position by far away is Stuhini. Like I say, last year alone, we took $24,000 in salary. My wife and I wrote $186,000 in checks, and there's no cheap stock, no cheap founder stock, no shares for debt, none of those games at all. Right? We're transparent. We buy either in the market or buying the financings. I participate in all but one financing. I always believe it's my job to write the first check. And how can I expect people to write checks when I'm not willing to write them myself, right? And down here, if I was to raise money today, I'd be writing a pretty big check, because these levels are pretty attractive down here, right? And again, I like the moly space. When I got this project, I just knew it was a good project. There's a few of them out there. It's got some meat on the bones, and one day it'll come to life. But the more I look into moly and I talk to the experts at CPM or Moly Association, the more research I do, the more excited I get, because it just looks exciting. Again, I don't want to hang my hat on what might happen, but any breakthrough, and you're using it for cars or using it for batteries and all these things they're talking about, me and my shareholders in the backstroke in Fiji, and I took that quote from Karen. Karen made a friend of mine, and reward our shareholders. And that's what our job is. My job is to make my shareholders money. Period. That's my job, and I'm aligned with my shareholders. And I'm behind the scenes. I'm quite excited. I just watch the price of molybdenum every day, and it recently went up from 2250. It's now trading in the 2350 range. And before, even though it spiked up into the 30s, it couldn't get above 20, and it kind of triple topped. It kept bumping, hitting 20. Now it's trading at 2350. And I wanted to argue in a recent CEO comment that it's the best performing commodity out there. And our council is very conservative. They go, Dave, you have to have tables and references, and I had to pick a time frame. And it was a bit tricky, and I decided to back off. But the fact that in 2000 it was $7 a pound, and today it's $23.50. That's a pretty impressive commodity. And when companies like Freeport are commenting that it's a very tight market, there's not abundances of it, and it's growing quite rapidly. And it's again, where is it going to come from? You can't just snap your fingers and create it. And like copper is the very same story too. There's many more copper projects to choose from, but where's it going to come from? And also people don't realize is our project's very shovel ready. It's been through feasibility. You can see you don't have to remove trees. There's no salmon in the streams, all this kind of stuff. But most of these projects, it takes, I read recently a copper discovery is 24 years of production. And there's awakening coming out there amongst a lot of people. I'm like, what do you mean we need copper? And what do you mean we can't just snap our fingers and get it? And where's the copper? This electrification. There's a huge opportunity forming, I believe.
Sure is.
Be careful and be very careful when we buy our companies, right?
Yeah.
Be patient too.
Be patient too, because this is not going to happen overnight. Even if these things are going to. I look at the copper supply and demand projections too, and it's not an overnight thing. It's gradual and it's going to take time. And so that's why also the disclaimer at the beginning, I don't say it to cover my ass, although I guess I am partly, of course, but I mean it. Like this is the risky sector. It takes time. And I think it must have been Warren Buffett or whatever great investor, whoever it might have been, said that the market can stay rational for longer than you can stay liquid. So it's important for people to pay attention to these things.
A couple of years ago, I was at a roundup in Vancouver, and S&P Global was presenting on copper. And my background's math and statistics, and it's such a compelling argument that there's no supply coming down, and all these great projects that are high grade are running out. They're becoming very depleted, and the next generation of projects just don't have the grades. And it's a cataclysmic storm coming. I truly believe copper, but it might have to go to $20 a pound. I mean, copper is 25 cents a pound in the late 90s. BHP and Rio had laid off their entire exploration staff. There's no one on the planet looking for it. And China was emerging. And copper had to go from 25 cents a pound to $4 a pound, which is a pretty dramatic move to spur on the next generation of exploration. Even all those projects that were discovered in the early 2000s, very few of them moved forward. They're all sitting in limbo. But again, because CapEx and OpEx have gone up so much, and they're no longer over 1%. They're typically 0.4, 0.5% equivalent, right? And they're just not economic at these. The cost to build the mines is too much, and that's again why people are reluctant to do. Why would you want to put out a PA that's negative? Right?
I agree. I think that's a good note to end the conversation. I don't think I have any other questions. Is there something that you came here hoping to talk about, but I'm failing to bring up?
No, I really appreciate the time. I just want people to think about molybdenum and look into it and do some research. And I'm available to speak to people anytime. And just call me up. I'll happily put a Zoom and do a presentation. And anyone wants to come to Ruby Creek, we're welcome to tour the project as well. And we're busy behind the scenes, and we'll have some news flow coming out soon. And don't discount our other projects too. They're pretty significant. Again, our Manitoba Nickel project. Have a look at it. Look at some of the previous intercepts. I mean. And also our big zinc project as well. It's road accessible. It's in southern BC. Tech's got a big deposit there, and any drilling, the limited drilling done on the structures that extend onto our tenors are robust, and we believe that it's a bigger project, and again, we can't really move forward without Tech's cooperation. They can't move forward without ours. And again, it's a long shot anyway, but it's a nice project, and we're zinc's interesting.